If we can ask folks to come on in, we're getting ready to get started. I want to welcome everyone to the GBH studios located in the heart of the Boston Public Library and nestled here within the space of the Newsfeed Cafe. Yeah, I can give it a round of applause. We are very excited to have you join us today for GBH's inaugural Media Summit, Bridging the Divide 2025. My name is Sandra Lopez-Burke, and I am the Managing Director of Community and Government Relations at GBH, and my pronouns are she, her, and ella. It is truly an honor to have you all here today with us for the kickoff of our Media Summit. I'm also so pleased to work with a team dedicated to our mission of enriching the lives of our communities through programs and services that educate, inspire, and entertain, fostering citizenship and culture, the joy of learning, and the power of diverse perspectives. Our focus is to be in the community, not just for the community. And as such, we are community-centered and seek to engage our community members, including amplifying community and cultural connections, engagement, and participation in our work. The vision is part of how the GBH studio in the Boston Public Library came to be almost a decade ago and is free and open to all. This studio hosts our Boston Public Radio program live 3 days a week, engaging our public to ask our governor, mayor, and other leaders throughout the country questions in real time. We also host a monthly spoken word event where people from all ages share their gift of poetry, along with musical performances and monthly Nova trivia nights. Indeed, it is an extraordinary venue in the heart of our community, bringing voices together for convenings, gatherings, and celebrations. GBH stands as a leading multi-platform creator for public media in America, delivering compelling stories, experiences, and information to audiences wherever they are through its content, events, and services. We are committed to making media accessible to all. And headquartered right here in Boston, GBH includes and serves our diverse community, fostering growth and empowering individuals through our programming. It is fitting that GBH's Media Summit, Bridging the Divide in 2025, begins here at the Boston Public Library, our 177-year-old institution and one of Boston's great educational, cultural, and civic treasures. It is the first urban, municipally funded, free public library in the United States, the first public library to lend books, the first to have a branch library, and the first to have a children's room. Inspired by our own editor-in-chief of special editorial projects, Deborah Adams Simmons, her vision, embraced by the entire GBH Foundation, has inspired us to create the Media Summit and has brought together over 500 journalists and media leaders, scholars, civic participation experts, philanthropic, and community leaders to amplify the intersection of media and democracy. We will explore ways to build trust and transparency, protect free speech, and embrace innovation and civic engagement, the revolutionary ideals upon which the nation was built 250 years ago. Let that sink in for a quick second. So special thanks to Carnegie Corporation of New York for their philanthropic support of hosting and pulling this event together. Now, I have the pleasure of sharing a few housekeeping guidelines with everyone here in the space. So in the event of an emergency, please exit the building through the 2 areas marked exit on either side of me. And for those who need access to the restroom facilities, please know that there are 2 restrooms here to my right, and there's a code on the doors for you. And there are additional restrooms to the back of where everyone is standing near the main desks behind you. Once again, welcome to the GBH studio at the Newsfeed Cafe, located in the best and oldest library in the country, the Boston Public Library. I am very excited to join you in all the conversations to be had. It is now my great pleasure to introduce a colleague and dear friend of mine, Alberto Vaseo III. He is our partner with GBH Amplifies Community Conversations, also held here in the library, and you can look it up and find them on YouTube and watch all the former tapings that we've had. Alberto is also the president of El Mundo Boston and La Hora de Café and will be our MC for these sessions today. Alberto, over to you, my friend.
All right. Thank you. Muchas gracias, Sandra. I just want to start off by saying that Sandra is the most amazing, talented, and humble person that I know that works for GBH. Did I read that exactly how you wrote it? Okay, good. All right. No, for me, it's a pleasure and an honor to be here at this incredible venue. We always talk about the Newsfeed Cafe and obviously the Boston Public Library. As a matter of fact, I haven't seen this many people here since we did free buffet night. Remember that? No, I'm just kidding. We haven't had free buffet night, not yet. As you said, El Mundo Boston's been around for 52 years. It's the only thing I can remember. So as a proud Bostonian, son of a Cuban and Ecuadorian, I've had the opportunity to highlight many, many inspiring faces and voices of my particular community, the Latino community. But the thing is, every time I see a camera and I'm directing to the panel, remember that you can have an engaging, informative session, but it could also be fun and put a positive energy. So for that, I want everybody to give us a round of applause for the panel. Get them going. No, I'm also honored to be part of those engaging conversations GBH amplifies here. So without further ado, I also want to thank GBH for this media summit, Bridging the Divide. The content today is so important at this time. I am sure you're going to get a lot out of the panels, the discussions. We have another event. So first up, without further ado, our panel conversation will focus on my generation, the youth, right? The youth. Youth, seeding the future, educating and empowering our youngest generation. And it's being moderated by Seeta Pai. She's our vice president of GBH's Children's Media and Education. Now, before we get started, please turn your attention to the video monitors above for the PBS Kids Civic Sizzle Reel.
This is something that the whole community can enjoy.
Together we're the key to community. I said you and me, she and he, we.
Together, they make up the community.
Just take a look around, there are amazing folks to meet. Come and check out what they do as you're walking down the street. Train conductor runs the train.
Welcome aboard.
Plumber clears your clogged up drain. Clean it up. Constructor builder builds so high in the sky with a tower crane. Greengrocer sells you fruit, dry cleaner cleans your soup. The lady in the music store gives lessons on the flute. Dog walker walking poodles, the cook is cooking noodles. The baker in the bakery is baking up some strudels. What brings you to my bake shop?
This is so cool.
A lawyer, a doctor, a teacher. There's a storyteller, a lemonade seller.
Y-E-S.
She's an awesome speller. A Girl Scout troop.
Cool nature badges.
A volunteer at a kitchen serving soup.
Amazing.
The people that you greet when you're walking down the street, they do important jobs and they make our town complete. You and me, she and he, we. Together we're the keys to community.
I love a happy ending.
Welcome everyone to this discussion. We're so glad you're here. I'm Seeta Pai. And today we're going to talk about issues at the intersection of civics, civic engagement, civic skills, education and media, particularly as they relate to kids and young people, pre-K to 12, grades 12, that is. And we're hoping to offer some concrete tips for educating and empowering kids and young people to become empathic humans and engaged citizens. As my GBH colleagues have heard me say many a time, if we're waiting until November, election time, to think about and worry about civics education, it's just too late. So I have a wonderful group of friends here to share their wisdom with us, and I'm delighted to be joined by them. We have Sara DeWitt, who's the head of PBS Kids and my dance partner in this public media journey. Lisa Guernsey, Senior Director of Education Policy at New America, who I've been a fan of for a couple of decades now. Neema Avashia, longtime Boston Public Schools educator and author, and obviously a sister from another mother. And Merve, Lapus, VP of Education Outreach and Engagement at Common Sense Media, a former colleague, and the coolest dad ever. So Sara, I'll go right to you. Your work touches the littlest among us at PBS Kids and through PBS Kids. How do you think about something as weighty as civics education for someone as young as 3 or 4? And how do you translate this? How do you operationalize this through media?
Well, thank you, Seeta, and it's great to be here with everyone today. Yes, we often get that question, how do you teach civics to 3 and 4-year-olds? But the truth of the matter is the foundational skills in civics are really the same things that kids need to learn to get ready for school, the things that make you a good neighbor and make you a good member of your family and a really engaged community member. So we really are starting with basic social studies curriculum. Who are you in relationship to your family members? Who are you and how are you a helper in your neighborhood? Do you know your neighbors and how do you work with them? How do they help you and how do you help them? And then how are you helpful in your school community as well? So it kind of broadens. And when you think about this from the media perspective, I mean, this sets up really great opportunities for stories because it's all about those relationships. It's about how you figure out how to be a good big sister, a big brother. How do you figure out how to help the kid who's next door, who's a little bit younger than you, who doesn't know how to climb the stairs on the slide? So these are things that can really be pulled out in storytelling in a fun way. So for Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, it's maybe how you vote on the class pet. For Rosie's Rules, it's how does the postal system work, and can I mail my cat to my abuela in Mexico? And all the way up to Arthur, how do I engage in community service? How do I volunteer? So there are all kinds of things that you can do in stories that can be really relatable to children, help them see themselves in the world and how they can relate, and really give them some good guidelines for how to engage when they are a member of the community.
Thank you. I love that. I think lessons that all of us can learn these days. And Lisa, I've always admired, in fact, learned from your perspective, very nuanced perspective on young people's media use and their education and the role of media literacy. What would you say lay people and the media often get wrong about kids and youth in this regard, and how should we be thinking instead, especially today?
Yeah, thank you, Seeta. And again, great to be with all of you here. Many years back when I was a journalist, an education and technology journalist, looking at what we knew from the science of learning, I was discovering that there were the sensationalized headlines about what media was doing to kids' brains, and then there was what we really knew from the research, and they did not match up. And so since then, we at New America and in many other places, Common Sense Media has done a lot of this really good research as well, has been able to show that we often fixate on the amount of time that children are spending watching media or playing games, and that is one component, but if you only look at time, you're missing so much more. And especially when we think about civics education and what it means to be interacting in your community and with your peers and with your family, then we have to look at the context of that learning. So who's around you as you're watching something? What are you gaining from that? How does that match your life? We have to look at the content on the screen. Is it good quality content that is actually helping children learn something? And we do have a ton of research on what components we need in media to make sure that it's really high quality. And then there's the individual child, right? There's so much that changes for kids as they move from age 3 to age 4 to all the way up to 6, and then they're moving on to middle school, and they're thinking about their worlds differently, and we have to take all of that into account, as well as everybody's individual needs and perspectives. So I recognize it's a lot more to say than just screen time, but if you just consider those 3 C's, the content, the context, and child, we can have a more nuanced conversation, and we can start to get to the the essence of what learning is.
Thank you. Now I'd like to turn to the classroom with you, Neema. You've been a civics and history teacher and teacher educator for over 2 decades now. And so with respect to civics education, I was curious what you thought has stayed the same since you first started teaching, and what has changed from those days?
I think it's easier to talk about what's changed because particularly in the last decade, it's a lot. You know, I think when I first started teaching civics, we were operating from an assumption that our institutions could be pushed to do better, that they didn't always do the right thing, and that they certainly often did the wrong thing, but that citizens, through organizing, through movements, could force institutions to move towards justice. I think in the last decade, that idea has been really challenged by multiple presidencies, by COVID. I think young people now, and I think actually this isn't just young people, I think this is Americans kind of writ large, are really struggling with trust in institutions. And so as a teacher, it makes it really hard to be a civics teacher whose job is to teach institutions, right? If you look at the Massachusetts civic standards, they're very much like learn the structures of government. Well, how do we talk about checks and balances when they're not happening? These things are very theoretical in the moment we're living in. And it makes me actually think about what Sara said about the work that she's doing with the youngest kids, and that actually it's the work that we can do with all kids, right? That really grounding down into like, what does it mean to be a member of community? What does it mean to think about community care? Those feel to me like the places as a teacher that I can move and know that I'm operating in good faith, and not that I'm misleading kids or telling them a story that isn't true, but that is a space where I think there is opportunity to talk about things like mutual aid, to sort of show kids models for like, what does it look like when communities engage in like, I think about Appalachia and I think about climate disaster and the way people respond to that, right? How can I show you models of community care where regardless of what institutions do or don't do, like we can be people who take care of each other, feels to me like the place that as a teacher, I think there's the most opportunity right now.
Fantastic, I love that. And of course, the media landscape has changed tremendously from 20 years ago to now. So Merve, that brings me to you. Common Sense has been collecting national data on youth media for several years now. I know you had some recent results out as well. How are young people feeling about the world right now as it relates to media and tech and democracy? You know, are there causes for concern? Are there causes for celebration?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important that we really take the time to understand the context of the communities we support, especially our young kids. So take the time to understand our classrooms, take the time to understand the families and the communities they come from. But it is also really important to kind of get a sense of what is the kind of the national feeling. And so earlier this year, we actually put out a national survey that was focused on the state of kids and families in America. And we interviewed 1,300 parents and 1,100 kids, really oversampling in with communities of color and low-income communities to really get a sense of kind of where are they and how are they feeling. And I think on the positive side, I think despite political polarization, there is a shared sentiment that we all want what's best for our kids around expanded mental health services, stronger education systems, economic security for families, government prioritization of youth-focused policies. Right? So across the board, these are areas that we want for our kids. However, we are also finding that families and kids are reporting that their lives right now are either just fair or feeling poor. Like that's the sentiment where they're at. They also have a perceived decline in their well-being of their kids. They feel it, kids feel it, parents are also seeing this. And specific areas where they're seeing additional decline are in areas of resilience. How do they overcome through challenges? Independence, not feeling that we can build independences sooner in the way that our kids are developing. Their diets are worse. Environmental conditions are feeling worse. Physical activity seems to be down. And their values and morals are feeling more challenged. So it all sounds really dark, but what this tells me is there's so much opportunity for us to really identify how we can be supporting our kids, and especially as we talk about media and the intersection, how much of this gets exacerbated by the social media or the platforms that they're on that might even almost overstimulate this idea versus understanding the real context in their community. So it's really important that we understand our own communities and not just kind of ride the tide of what we see, but recognize that this is a tide that is moving in their spaces pretty prevalently.
Wow. And it's great that you're able to kind of bring the voices of many and not shy away from some of the difficult findings there. And Neema, I know we've talked about this in terms of your experience with youth as someone entrusted with the care of youth, but also as growing up as a young person. I wondered if you could compare your experience among teens in the Boston public schools with young people in the rural Appalachian communities where you're from. Are they as different as we sometimes think they might be, or what's similar, what binds them together, what's different?
I think one of the most surprising things to me when I started teaching in Boston was how similar actually the situation was for my students in Boston relative to how I'd grown up in Appalachia. When you think about sort of the struggles that families who are working class families face, there is a lot of class shared experience across rural and urban spaces. I do think a big difference for Appalachian youth right now is the level of vitriol that they're experiencing from state governments, particularly queer Appalachian youth. The level of sort of like overt desire to deny humanity to queer youth in Appalachia and the South is quite different than what a kid in Boston is experiencing, where I think there is still a really significant commitment to affirming the lives of young people of color and queer youth. That feels to me like a very big difference in the experiences. But I do think that across geography, sort of some of the struggles are the struggles, right? I think what Merve's talking about in the data, my guess is if you looked at that data across geography, it's not that different. That young people, I think, are looking at the world, and I think they do feel a kind of despair sometimes with, like, what are adults doing right now? Like, are adults actively trying to protect us or take care of us, or are we just kind of all, watching the fire and not knowing what to do about it? That, to me, feels very shared across geography.
Interesting. Sara, listening to Neema talk about the communities that she's a part of, it sort of reminded me that we in public media think a lot about the national, local connections. As we know, one of public media's greatest strengths is our deep roots in diverse local communities around the country. So could you tell me a little bit about how you operationalize this concept when it comes to educational programming, which you distribute nationally?
Yes, I mean, one of the things that really makes public media stand out is that local connection, the ability to take that content into communities and meet kids where they are and be really relatable within the community that they are living in. We know from years and years of research, some of Lisa's research as well, that when adults and when peers talk about media, the learning gains are greater. When there's someone who's talking to them about the media experience they're having, they can take away even more and get and have a kind of a deeper connection to it. And so I think that's some of the amazing work that our stations do on the ground, is we put these shows out nationally for all kids to see and games for them to play, but then it's the community stations, the local stations and markets, who then take that out into public libraries, into boys and girls clubs, housing authorities, really making those civic connections that really are part of that whole civics education in real life. It helps kids kind of see how these community structures work, but it also gives them the benefit of seeing that community and seeing that content in a local community environment. There's a lot that we can do on the ground that can really make this more meaningful for kids.
Thank you. Lisa, local. It doesn't get much more local than your local public library. We're sitting here in this amazing public library, and later today I think we're going to hear more about libraries and what they enable. And in many ways, public media can be likened to public libraries. I think you'd agree. And I know you've been researching democracy and information that has not always been truly public for all young people and not equally accessed by all. And could you tell us more? Because that's a fascinating story.
Yeah, thank you, Seeta. We have been looking at a story, a civil rights story that is not in the textbooks and should be. that happened in Virginia, which is my home state, in 1939. So we're talking before the days of the lunch counter sit-ins that we may have learned from our textbooks that happened in North Carolina. In 1939, at a public library in Alexandria, Virginia, there were 5 young African-American men who wanted to get library cards. And they knew that they were not allowed in the library because of the color of their skin, but they had not been able to make their case in any other way. So they did one of the first instances of a nonviolent demonstration of their rights by walking into the library, asking for library cards, being told, no, you cannot have one, and sitting down with a book and reading quietly at the table until they were all arrested about an hour later, because the librarian panicked and didn't know what to do with the fact that these African-American men, young men, 17 to 22 years old or 18 to 22 years old, were in the library. That story we're bringing out now to help young people see that these questions of access and accessibility and being able to be welcomed into spaces we've been working through this in our country since the dawn of our country. We're still working through it, but there are ways to shine a spotlight on what inequality looks like that can help people see, oh, yeah, that's not okay. And their work and their sit-in actually help to change things over time. And across the state of Virginia and across library systems as well. So that's a story that, to me, brings in both the importance of these public spaces that should be for all and the knowledge gathering that can happen in those spaces, but also how much we do need to keep telling the stories of our past and interrogating them and thinking through what really did happen. So we're doing some work now at New America to do some digitization, digital media work that's bringing the primary source documents from that story to life for students. And I think so many people are doing this great work now, right? That we need to find ways for our young people to feel connected to both the past and see a path forward to the future. And you can do that through some of this great media.
Yeah, and you know what I love about this panel really is how we're talking about how learning about civic engagement, about our country's history, about how to be a good neighbor, et cetera, can actually happen in so many different places. It's not just in the classroom, and it could be in a library, can be, as you said, in a housing authority, but it can also be in a home. And so, Merve, I know that at Common Sense, you've been thinking a lot about the many different places that young people learn and encounter media and technology. So I wonder if you could tell me a little bit more about that, whether that's in libraries, because I know you're embarking on a new initiative there, but also about media and civic learning at home. Yeah. Where do families and caregivers fit into this equation regarding young people and their media use and their civic learning?
Yeah, I mean, for over 20 years, the organization has been really focused on how do we look at a whole community approach to addressing media literacy, civic engagement, digital literacy, now even AI literacy, and the role that we all play in the way that we engage with technology and how it engages with us and the impact then in our communities. And you know, for the time that I've been working the organization, so over 20 years, we've been focused on working with schools in a very strong way, as well as working with families. But that's part of this whole community approach. We want to make sure, how do we get to all families? And schools have been a really great way of being able to do that. We are currently over 90,000 schools in the US, about 1.4 million educators actively using our site to bring these resources and these conversations into the classroom. However, we need to recognize that these are conversations that are much more than just in the classroom. We need to be able to develop transferable skills, skills that are going to be applied anywhere they go, because at 9 o'clock at night when they have their device at home alone, are they making really critical decisions in the way that they're using media and tech? Libraries are another great space to be able to have those conversations, and we've got such activated individuals here already focusing on supporting our young kids and teens and how to think critically about their work and their impact. And so thanks to the Carnegie Corporation, we're actually going to be doing a pilot working really directly with public libraries to better understand their needs and how we can support them in leveraging resources that we've already developed in the classroom and adapt them into the needs here in these library spaces so that we can really see this type of application and learning at home, in public spaces, at school, and really, again, create those transferable skills. It's knowing how to use the tools, what they do to you, but then how do they impact your development and the way that they affect your well-being and application in your lives.
Fantastic. And just to follow up on that just a little bit, in terms of home, in terms of parents and caregivers, and you shared a little bit about how they're thinking about their lives and their children's lives and their, and what the future may hold. What would you say are sort of some key takeaways as parents in the audience or as caregivers, or for those of us who work with them, what are some things we can bring to them with regard to civic engagement and media and how those two go together?
Well, I mean, I think there is a reality that kids are dealing with much more than just peer pressure. They're actually dealing with a number of areas of pressure. And these areas of pressure are exacerbated by the platforms that they're on or the messages that they receive. There also is a pressure to be more civically engaged, having to choose a side. And that's something that we've found in this grind research we did actually with partners just down the street at the Center for Digital Thriving, where we're looking at, kids were feeling pressure for academics, for peers and friendship, but then also, again, in how they show up on these platforms or how they show up with each other. And so when we really think about how are we supporting them and their needs, we want to make sure that we're being really thoughtful and honest as parents. How do I show up because I thoughtfully and honestly want to know, what is this doing for you? Why are you using it? How do you use it? And not trying to just catch them on something. We're hearing that a lot right now where kids aren't as apt to talk to their parents because the first thing a parent typically will do is take it away, especially if it's something that feels problematic. Well, we are just needing to try and understand this is a new way that our kids are growing up. Developmentally, our kids are supposed to be out and about, running around these streets until the lights turn on. And that's not the world we live in anymore. So developmentally, where are they going to be? It's with their friends, and their friends are online in these spaces. So how do we navigate those realities so we can be supportive, but not just recognize that oftentimes there's a real fear. I get it. I'm a parent. I've got two girls, and I have a fear that they're going to run into something, and I don't want them to. But what am I doing to empower them to think critically about these issues, but also what am I doing to show up? So whether it's positive, negative, challenging, they know to come to me. And that's being honest and that's being truthful, not just trying to catch them in an act.
I love that. Not just catch them, but show up for them. Yeah, I love that. And Lisa, you've certainly written about this and thought about this a lot. And you've also been very vocal about the potential, the positive potential of media and technology to enable learning, to enable young people's civic engagement. What would you say are the sort of top two things we want to take away or we as a field must think about from toddlers to teens?
Yeah. I want to piggyback, Merve, on what you were just pointing out there. There's a phrase by Fernanda Rain in Ed Week article this week that you all should read about civics education. And she says we really need to not be gatekeepers for our youth. We need to be guides. And we've talked and done some research at New America on what media mentorship can look like, and that can start at those youngest years when you're just showing this is what it looks like to engage with a TV show and react to it, but also know when to turn it off, know when to take a break, all the way up to the later years of high school where you're like, wait, I need to be able to show kids that I can be there for them as an adult, and I can answer or try to help them find answers to their hard questions by using new media in different ways or by understanding how social media works. So I feel like we need to get to a place where we're not disciplining our kids and we're not closing all the doors to media, but we're just recognizing how powerful it is and how it has to be harnessed for good. It's got to be harnessed for learning, or else we're sunk.
Thank you. From toddlers and teens to teachers, because I think teachers are also facing, this plethora of content, of platforms. Kids are bringing them into the classroom, or they're bringing their experience with it into the classroom, et cetera. But so I'm now curious, sort of from the teacher's perspective, what they are going through in this landscape. I was just speaking with someone just earlier who was talking about, I think it might have been Merve even, their child having to take, we're really great about having kids learn to take multiple perspectives and have civil discourse across multiple perspectives. But that must be kind of hard on a teacher too, especially when in extremely divisive times. So in this time, Neema, what would you say teachers need most?
I think teachers need advocates. and they need protection in a way, right? We're seeing nationally, like, teachers lose their jobs for recognizing kids in their full humanity and calling them the name that the child wants to be called. Or teachers get books. This happened in Western Mass. Teachers get interrogated by police for having books in their classroom. Like, this isn't an away problem. This is a problem everywhere, right? And I think historically, people sometimes only show up to school committee or to school board when there's a problem, but I think we're in a moment where we really need people to show up to affirm. And I think that's true for public schools. I think it's true for public libraries too. We need people to run for school boards, to run to be on library boards, to go to those meetings, to affirm the values that we think are important, to affirm the kind of instruction that we think is important, because I think if we're not affirming it, it's gonna go. Even if it's not legislated out, I think people's fear, like teachers are scared. It is a very scary thing to feel like you are under a microscope all the time and doing things that instinctually feel right to you, which is like inviting a child to sort of like share their journey of figuring out who they are, or share their questions, or think about hard issues together. Like, those are very natural ways for an educator to be with a young person. That's what we're supposed to do. But when those things are being criminalized, I think there is a very, very profound chilling effect, even when the criminalization isn't in your local school district. I think it has a psychological effect on educators in terms of raising the question of, like, what is my work then? What am I supposed to do with young people if I can't engage them authentically in their identity development? And so I think we need a kind of very vocal affirmation and support that people are not used to doing. If you watch school committee meetings, they are not full of people going and saying, thank you, keep doing what you're doing. And we need them to be full of that.
Yes, thank a teacher as we approach Teacher Appreciation Week, but don't just do it at Teacher Appreciation Week, for sure. But based on what you know about how young people both consume and create media, because we haven't talked about that part, I would love to hear a little bit about, as we leave here, your parting thoughts for youth creating media. What are some of the must-knows for us and must-dos, to foster that critical thinking and understanding across divides, and to foster encouragement of youth-created media?
Yeah, and I think it's understand the intentionality. I think there's this push perspective, especially for youth who are growing up in watching and streaming, where they feel like, oh, in order to gain the attention, I need to be more provocative, or I need to be bolder. Well, what is your authentic self? I think one of the things that we do, again, with our partners in this research, is really looking at what are the morals and values we bring into our daily lives, and how do these pieces of technology, these platforms, or even what I create, do they affirm or actually go against my own values? If I have a value around showing up and being trusted and collaborating, does this platform actually feel trustworthy? I might want to question that. Does what I'm putting out there actually make me feel a little sticky, but I'm doing it for what reason? Really leaning in on the impact that it has and how it connects to, again, your core values and your core intentions, and how do you then push that forward? I think the hard part is we put so much value in the attention, regardless of it being positive or negative, that the openness of being able to create for the sake of getting a click or getting that attention has overcome the real kind of deep, valuable aspects for kids. And most content creators will already share with you that it is incredibly hard to stay on top of it every day, but you don't see that. Our kids don't see that. And how do we really share that story more consistently so that they understand how it brings to the table?
Fantastic, thank you. Sara, I wonder, as we are thinking about the littlest ones, whether you could close us out by sharing some of your plans for upcoming PBS Kids educational programming to build, as you said, empathy, teach kids to be good neighbors, understand what it means to live in a community. What are your plans?
Well, I think, all the things we've been discussing here, it just reminds me again that especially the content for early childhood, it gives us a real opportunity to introduce ideas and storylines that make it a safe place for discussion later, right? If you have watched something where you see the characters struggle with, you and I have different opinions, but we're able to work it out, then you can relate to that later when it happens to you in real life. Or you can open that conversation with your kids to talk about what are you going to do in this kind of situation. So it can have this really good invitation moment to get into good content, and how you can discuss it. So the other thing about civics is it really is kind of across everything we do. Once you think about that basic idea of how do I as a child fit into my community, you start to see how it connects across all of our shows. So we think about what's coming up next. Tomorrow we have a special in shorts coming from GBH and a game for a show called Acoustic Rooster. It's about jazz. It's based on Kwame Alexander's book. But there's so much in it that is also about relationships. It's about call and response. It's about, we were talking earlier about giving someone else the spotlight at some moments, and that's going to be better for the whole. So you can find that there. You also, we have coming up this summer a new show from Al Roker called Weather Hunters. And a big piece of that also is how does the weather in your community affect what happens to you every day, and how do kids need to respond to that and react to it? What about a disaster in a community? How do you prepare for an emergency? That's a really important piece of core civic education, is how a community comes together to prepare for a disaster and respond to it. And so those kinds of things can bring that civics education to light, even if it isn't a show completely focused on civics. And finally, I'll just end with some research that just came out that I think is really important. UCLA Center for Scholars and Storytellers did a survey of teenagers about the show Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood. So kids had watched it when they were young, asking them when they're 13, 14, 15, what do they remember from the show? And it really was a testament to the lasting impact of the content that is created for young children and how impressionable those kids are, how much they take with them. Many teenagers remembered the show. They could name a song from the show. They said that they still use some of these strategies when they had arguments with their friends. They remembered the lessons from Daniel Tiger that helped them diffuse a situation or change the subject or understand each other. And also they remembered a feeling of safety. They remembered feeling loved by watching that show. And so it just kind of reinforces for us the importance of putting real, thoughtful intention behind the media that we create, knowing that it can have this true lasting impact on children.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all. Some just quick wrap up of the things I heard. Agamaga, Daniel Tiger, let's make sure that we're being good neighbors, and that lessons at that stage couldn't last a lifetime. And that could be said for teens as well. But once we start to get into that age, what is their perspective? How are they showing up? What are they doing? What are their concerns? And what is their context? It's not just screen time, but it's what's, a screen is not a screen is not a screen. What's the content? What's the context? What is the child? Definitely thinking about what is on their minds right now, Merve, in terms of the concerns that they are facing, but also thinking about where they spend so many of their waking hours, which is in school, and the people who are, molding them and supporting them, the teachers, the educators who are supporting them, and what they need. So I thank you all for kicking us off here today with these wonderfully rich, I feel like we could spend a whole summit talking about these topics, but it's great to have kicked us off with the youngest generation, and hopefully you've all taken away some great nuggets to take us into the whole summit. Thank you.